I want to talk about some concerns that people have when they start a carnivore diet. Because it sounds very common sense. Eat protein, eat fat, these diseases that we have go away. But people have concerns. First one is cholesterol, which I'm sure that you've heard of. Um, LDL cholesterol seems to increase on a carnivore diet. Is that a concern for people?
I don't know why it would, since it's associated with longer life and lower all-cause mortality and less cardiovascular disease and less death from infectious disease and less lower rates of death from cancer and things like that, lower rates of Alzheimer's, lower rates of Parkinson's, lower rates of dementia, and the list goes on. There has never been any experimental data showing that cholesterol of any form, be it total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, SD-LDL cholesterol, ApoB, what have you, there's no experimental data showing a cause and effect relationship between any cholesterols and cardiovascular disease. None. It's never been done. Those studies have been performed, but they disproved or went against the cholesterol heart hypothesis. So there's never been a high-level randomized controlled trial that showed a cause and effect relationship between cholesterol and cardiovascular disease. But there have been at least 5 large-scale randomized controlled trials with thousands of human subjects in a well-designed, well-controlled study that have shown the opposite. They've shown either no benefit from replacing animal fats with polyunsaturated vegetable oils and margarine and things like that, lowering cholesterol, and no benefit to that from a cardiovascular sense. And 2 of them show the larger, better designed studies actually showed that when you lowered animal fat and replaced it with plant oils and margarines, and lowered LDL cholesterol, that you actually more people died of heart attacks and strokes as a result. So these would be things like the Minnesota coronary experiment, that had nearly 10,000 subjects in it. And it was a 5-year study, went from 1968 to 1973. And this was, our good friend Ansel Keys, who's well known to be on the payroll for the sugar companies. He was on the cover of Time magazine, having pushed the cholesterol heart hypothesis. And so he did this study, really hoping for a win here with cholesterol and heart disease, and they found the opposite. And so, like any good scientist that had good ethics and ethical grounding, he buried it and hid it from public and wouldn't let it be published. 4 decades later, long after he was dead and rotting in the ground, burning in hell, I hope, other people from the NIH actually found, it's actually Ramsden from the NIH actually found sort of evidence that this study had been done, and tracked down some of the children from one of the other lead researchers on the study, and I said, "Hey, do you have your dad's old stuff? I'm looking. I heard this study was done. I heard he did it. And looking for some of this stuff." And they actually found all the data from this study, from 5 years of this study, in the basement in their dad's old things. And so that was published in, I think it was the BMJ, the British Medical Journal. I believe it was in 2014. And so that's available for anybody to look up. Look up the Minnesota coronary experiment, or the LA Veterans Affairs Hospital study, the Sydney heart trial. All of these things showed that that the cholesterol heart hypothesis was not correct. It certainly didn't corroborate them. And so the only studies that are available that show a link between cholesterol and heart disease are epidemiological and correlative. So these can only generate a hypothesis. They're hypothesis generating, but they cannot show a cause and effect relationship. Now they've started trotting out these Mendelian randomized trials. But just because you use the word randomized does not mean it's a randomized controlled trial, does not mean it's experimental trial, does not mean it can show a cause and effect relationship. Cannot. It's still epidemiological. It's highly flawed, and many, many, many top scientists, not including myself, have done very robust critiques and the flaws of these study designs, and shown very clearly these cannot show a cause and effect relationship. You cannot show a cause and effect relationship without experimental study where you change one variable and see what happens. Can't. Right. So this is still epidemiology. This is still observation. It's actually quite poor epidemiology. It's not going to be very accurate. And people can look up any number of critiques and reviews on that. Dr. Zoe Harcum has done plenty of those, and actually just came up with another one more recently, and she's fantastic. So there are plenty of people showing that this is just not going to show a cause-effect relationship. But we already have those studies. We already have studies that can show a cause and effect relationship, and they do not. They show no cause. They show no cause and effect relationship between cholesterol and cardiovascular disease. And in fact, some of them show an inverse relationship, meaning that if you lower cholesterol and you lower saturated or cholesterol and animal fat, that more people die from cardiovascular disease as a result of that. Also, there was a meta-analysis with 44 randomized controlled trials in it that actually showed that people on a high-fat, meat-based ketogenic diet, that actually it was the healthier people with lower BMI that actually had higher LDL cholesterol, and that as you got larger BMI, it actually went down. So it sort of went down sharply and sort of leveled off. And then as you got into the extremes of obesity, it actually, LDL even went down further, right? Okay, so why is that? These people are typically less healthy. It's associated with poorer health outcomes and being obese, and yet they have lower LDL. Okay, so it's good. Everyone should get obese then, I guess, is heart healthy. Well, we know that's not true. So the lower BMI individuals that are typically more metabolically healthy and healthier in other ways, they're the ones that had higher LDL. So you have your biochemical markers improving, and we see this in people on a carnivore diet and ketogenic diets. They improve massively. Diabetes goes away, autoimmunity goes away, all these other sorts of issues get better and better and better and better and better. But everyone goes to that sticking point. Oh my goodness, LDL. Okay, well, not everybody's LDL goes up. In fact, people that are less healthy, it goes down. Okay, but if all your markers and all your biomarkers getting better, and you've lost 200 pounds, 300 pounds, 400 pounds, there's a lady an Australian named Limitless Lindy that's lost 500 pounds, right? Documented. She documented it the entire way. 500 pounds. Okay, you're telling me that her cholesterol being slightly up compared to what we consider normal, and everything else being better, that she needs to just go back to what she was doing before and put back on the 500 pounds because she's at such a high risk for heart disease now. That doesn't make any sense. Like everything is showing that she's improving her health. And you're telling me that the high LDL is now it's going to kill her. That's what's going to kill her. Everything's getting better. So actually that's associated with better health and improving health. So why are we saying that that's a bad thing? I think that's a good thing. And that's what a lot of these large population studies show, is that higher cholesterol and higher LDL cholesterol actually improves health outcomes and lowers it, or is associated with a lower all-cause mortality rate, meaning that they live longer. And so that's really all you need to know. I mean, this was a complete and utter fraud. People like Ansel Keys perpetuated this fraud for money. And we know that. We have hard evidence of it. The Journal of the American Medical Association, one of the top medical journals in the world, published the internal memos from the sugar companies back in the 60s detailing how they paid off 3 Harvard professors to falsify data and publish fraudulent studies to make it appear as if cholesterol caused heart disease, when it was much more likely to be sugar and certainly cigarettes and things like that. And then they exonerated sugar and said that it was safe. And then one of those professors was named head of the USDA, and he was the one who authored and published the USDA declaration in the late 70s saying that the cholesterol caused heart disease, saturated fat, grease, cholesterol. Stop eating both. Oh my goodness. Then you look at that. So that we know that's a fraud. We know that's a lie. The Framingham study tried to suggest that or people said that the Framingham study said that higher levels of cholesterol was associated with higher cardiovascular disease mortality rates. But in fact, that was actually what the American Heart Association claimed it showed, when in fact the original data showed the opposite, that as you lowered total cholesterol, you increased cardiovascular disease mortality rate. Then more recently, the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, the top cardiology journal in the world, they published an umbrella review, which is the tip top pointy bit of the pyramid of the evidence hierarchy pyramid, right? You have randomized control trials, high quality ones. You can do crap randomized control trials. But let's say you have high quality ones, put those into a meta-analysis. You have crappy ones, you put that in a meta-analysis, you'll get a crappy meta-analysis, garbage in, garbage out. But let's say you have high quality meta-analysis, randomized controlled trials, do a high quality meta-analyses. Then over the years, you get a number of other meta-analyses of high quality randomized controlled trials. Then you say, okay, well, let's do a meta-analysis of those meta-analyses. That's called an umbrella review. So it's the tippy top point of that pyramid, as good as you're going to get. And one of these was published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology in 2020. And they looked at all the best evidence available for saturated fat being causative or linked at all to cardiovascular disease. And they found absolutely no connection whatsoever in the highest levels of evidence between increased saturated fat consumption and cardiovascular disease. And in fact, they found an inverse relationship between saturated fat consumption and stroke. So people that ate more saturated fat had less strokes. People ate less saturated fat had more strokes. So any way you want to slice it, we have been absolutely lied to and misled. In fact, just look at the 2015 U.S. nutrition guidelines, dietary guidelines. In 2015, they actually dropped the recommendation to limit saturated fat and cholesterol, dietary cholesterol, because they said there's absolutely no connection between dietary saturated fat and cholesterol and any poor health outcome, including cardiovascular disease. So that's already in the guidelines, and people just forget that. And so when you look at the vegan mafia who cherry pick and desperately try to defend their ideology because it's indefensible, so they have to lie and revert to character assassination, as one of the Schumpeter said, that the first thing that people do to protect their ideology is lie. And Thomas Sowell said, and the second thing they do is character assassination. So they do steps 1, 2, and they've invented 4 and 5, 3, 4, and 5 as well. But they're looking at this and saying that they're trying to defend their ideology on how this can possibly be, but it's really indefensible. We have mountains of evidence that saturated fat does not cause a problem. Cholesterol does not cause a problem. I mean, again, you look at that it's in the guidelines already by 2015, and no one really thought about it. And so these people will say, well, look at the recommendations from the European Council on the subject. And it's just like, well, why don't you use the U.S. ones? You're just skipping over the fact that those got taken out. They're not recommending you limit your calories to saturated fat to 10%. That got removed in 2015. And in fact, the JACC, the Journal of the American College of Cardiology, they said explicitly, like this, there should be no arbitrary upper limit on the consumption of saturated fat. And the lead authors on that paper had previously been on the panels that recommended limits on saturated fat consumption. And so this is them saying, hey, we got it wrong. This is what the data actually shows. And so they circumvent that and say, oh, well, and they make excuses about that study. And then they say, well, look at the European recommendations. Well, that's expert opinion. That's literally the lowest rank of evidence, and you're dismissing the highest rank of evidence in favor of the lowest rank of evidence, and ignoring the fact that other expert opinion, like the USA 2015 guidelines, said, yeah, don't worry about dietary saturated fat and cholesterol. It's completely a non-issue.